Welcome back to the Hip Replacement Podcast. I'm Chris Bystriansky, your host. I've had 2 hip replacement surgeries, but I'm about 10 plus years out from each one. One was more than 10 years ago, and the other one was about 12 years ago. And in that time, I've done Ironman triathlons, a host of other endurance events, and just had an active and relatively healthy lifestyle, I think. And I'm able to do a lot more than I thought I was going to be able to do following my hip replacement surgeries. And I'm here to share these things with you and help you in your recovery in any way possible. In this episode, though, I'm going to talk about all the different alternative treatments I tried before moving forward with a hip replacement surgery. I don't know about you, but I was absolutely terrified of the thought of going to get cut and my hip ripped open and my femur cut and some stainless steel and ceramic parts being put inside me. I was absolutely terrified of that whole process and the thought of it and living years after that. I didn't know what it would be like. So I tried everything I possibly could to put that off and to maybe head it off so it would not need to happen. So here's what I did. I mean, this took me a while. I probably did this for years to try to delay the hip replacement surgery. And obviously these things ultimately did not work for me or were not working fast enough. And I have ultimately had to have the hip replacement surgery. I'm not saying that any of these things don't work or they did not help me. Maybe they did delay it for years. Maybe they did give me some relief and I was in a much better position than I was otherwise. Who knows? But here goes. Here's what I tried. And I thought I exhausted every possibility before deciding to do the surgery. And I also went to 3 different surgeons to get 3 different opinions before I decided to move forward with the surgery. So I was literally trying to do everything I possibly could to avoid going under the knife, so to speak. And here's where it all started. My hip felt jammed. Like I slid into a base playing baseball or softball. I grew up playing baseball and played softball going into my 20s and 30s. And it felt like my hip was jammed, and if I could just spread it apart a little bit, I would get some relief. So the first thing I did was I went to see a chiropractor because I figured, well, maybe my hips were misaligned or my back was misaligned, and I just needed some stretching of the bones to give me some relief. Well, this is where I found out that or I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis because the chiropractor did some x-rays and she saw something that looked suspicious and she suggested that I might have osteoarthritis and that I should go see a surgeon eventually if the pain got too bad. So anyway, the initial chiropractor, maybe I got some back relief, but not much from the on the hip side. Then I turned to physical therapy. And the thought process here was, well, maybe if I could stretch the muscles, maybe if the physical therapist could work my muscles and build up some of the weaker muscles around my back and my legs and my hips, then that would give me some relief. And I think I did get some to a certain extent. I was still trying to golf at this point, and I wasn't able to turn as much as I wanted to. So maybe my muscles were very, very stiff in my legs and my hip and my back. And I just needed to get those stretched and with the help of a physical therapist. And I probably got some relief, but it was not long-term. And following that, I did a lot of stretching on my own. I was paying hundreds of dollars every time to go to a physical therapist. And I figured, well, I learned a lot of the stretches. Why don't I just continue doing this on my own and see how much relief I could possibly get? So there was a lot of stretching. And honestly, I felt great. But as soon as I would stand back up or try to walk any distance, whether that's over 10 minutes or a quarter mile or whatever it was, and the pain came right back and it was kind of excruciating. The next thing I tried was acupuncture. And the reason I tried acupuncture is because I had a good friend whose sister was an acupuncturist, or however you say that. She stuck needles in people for relief. And I was very, very hesitant on that because I'm not a needle person. I'm not, I don't like to get poked. My philosophy is the less times you get poked or cut, the better off your life will be. So I was very hesitant about that. I was a little suspicious about the whole practice anyway, but again, I'm trying to do anything to put off the hip replacement surgery. So I went to see her and I, was laying on the table and there's music or something going on, like some light music going on in the back room and in the background. And she had, the lights dimmed a little bit. I didn't understand the light dimmings. I don't know how she knew where to put the needles. But I was trusting her, and I'm laying there and I'm feeling just like these little pinpricks, and it was like being at a spa actually. And I'm laying there and I'm feeling these little pinpricks, and I open my eyes and I look down and there's like 20, 30 pins up and down my leg. I'm like, oh my gosh, how is this? I'm not really digging this, not really enjoying this. But I finished the session and I don't know if it gave me any relief. I don't know. Maybe it gave me relief in other parts of my life or other parts of my body. Maybe my muscles felt better after that, but certainly nothing in the bones around my hip. So I did not get a lot of relief with that. The next thing I tried were massages. And when I say massages, I mean deep tissue massages. So imagine a bodybuilder who is a woman and she worked on NFL players. Her main gig was working with an NFL team, and I caught her in the off season, and I would go to her house and I would lay down on a massage table, and she would get into my hip, get into my back, get into my sides, get into my legs. And honestly, it was quite painful, but enjoyable at the same time. I don't know if that sounds weird, but it hurt. But I felt like I was getting some relief, or at least it felt good on my muscles afterwards, but I was absolutely out of it when I left. I just felt like, boy, she worked me over and I'm going to be sore. And certainly every time I probably went 6, 7, 8 times, paying a couple $100 each time. Like Saturdays, consecutive Saturdays, I would go. And the concept here was that there's listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical therapist, but the way it was explained to me is that there's this thick layer of fascia tissue that needs to be stretched and softened up so that your body can move more fluidly and your energy and your muscles can work properly. Whatever it was, okay? I'm not exactly sure. But I did feel some relief from those types of massages in my muscles. I felt like I was a little more flexible in my back and in my legs and in my hips, but still, over time, the pain in my hip, whether I was walking 10 minutes or, any type of distance, I mean, the pain came back, and it just wasn't a long-term solution for me. Then what I tried after that was going back to the surgeon, and one of the surgeons suggested this platelet-rich plasma, or PRP injections. And what this was that they extract some blood, they take some blood out, of me, and then they do something to split up the plasma and split up the red blood cells, and then they inject the red blood cells back into my hip. And boy, they went deep into the hip with that injection. It was a big needle, and they went deep into the hip. I think it was probably a direct hip bullseye where they needed to get the plasma or the red blood cells or whatever they were injecting back in. And, I think it may have given me a little relief, but over time the pain came back. But I think there's some promise in that type of treatment. Somehow, somewhere, maybe I'm just trying these treatments years too early. And again, my surgeries were 10 years ago. So all of these treatments may be way more advanced than they were when I tried them. So I don't want to poo-poo on any type of alternative treatment. I'm just saying back then, they didn't give me long-lasting relief. Maybe they're better now. Maybe there's something that's added to any of these treatments and they work better now for people. Or maybe in my specific case, maybe my hip was too far gone. Maybe if I would have tried it a year earlier, it would have worked better. But anyway, the last thing I tried, and this was probably the most exotic and certainly the most expensive treatment that I tried. I heard about this doctor or this clinic in Colorado who was doing stem cell injections. And at the time I was living in Texas, and I needed to go, if I wanted to participate in this, I needed to get on a plane and go to Colorado because it was not offered in Texas. So I had a virtual call, and they went over the type of treatment that they did, and they said I would be a good candidate, and I'm willing to try it. So I got on a plane, went to Colorado, and I was there, I think, 2 or 3 days. I had to stay. And the treatment is essentially they would extract bone marrow which had stem cells in it or some type of cells in it that were reproductive or had some health benefits. So they would extract bone marrow from me, do something to those cells, and then inject those cells into my hip, again with a big needle, which they gave me some pretty strong painkillers, but I was awake during this whole thing. And frankly, it was very, very unnerving to be laying on the table on my stomach. And they're drilling with a very small drill into my pelvis on my back, right around my tailbone somewhere. And then I would feel a needle go in. I'm not in any pain at all, but I could feel these things. And I would feel a needle go in and, suck up something out of my pelvis. And then I'm laying there and they take the cells away. They take the bone marrow away. They did something with it. 30 minutes later, they came back and pumped these or injected these stem cells into my hip. And then I was instructed to, stay off the hip for a week or so and go and do some exercises when I got home. And one of the things that they wanted me to do was to run in a pool. I had a pool at my house, and it had a deep end. So I put like this flotation belt on, and they just wanted me to like run in place. So there's no weight on my hip. And I did that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I mean, maybe I got some benefit out of it, but it certainly wasn't long-term. I really, really wanted this to work because it seems so cutting edge. And how cool would that be to, take stem cells out of your own body and inject them where they needed to be. and have something like this cured. I wanted this to work, and for some reason it did not work with me. Again, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I tried to be too active after that. I don't think I did, but who knows? Maybe my hip was too far gone. Maybe I was doing something on a daily basis, or my body was doing something on a daily basis to prevent the healing process. And maybe that's what needed to be addressed first before we tried to heal. Stop doing the damage before trying to fix something. And maybe I wasn't doing that step. I don't know. I think over time, all of this stuff will get worked out and we'll have better treatments. Again, we're more than 10 years past all that. We're probably 13 years past when I tried the stem cell injections. But anyway, maybe I got some relief from it, but it did not last. And I eventually had to have the hip replacement surgery. So those were all of the things that I tried: the chiropractor, the physical therapy, the stretching, the acupuncture, the deep tissue massages, the PRP or platelet-rich plasma, and finally the stem cells. And then months after the stem cells, I had to go back to my favorite of the three surgeons that I visited originally, and I decided to move forward with the surgery. And the reason I did that was because I was in a lot of pain for a while, but I was kind of up against a deadline. I needed a resolution because my wife was pregnant, and I really wanted to have the surgery and be done with it, and then on the road to recovery before our baby was born. So I kind of had a deadline, and I set the surgery date. So those are all the different alternative treatments I tried. Would I do it all again? Knowing what I know now? Absolutely. I would have tried everything, and maybe if there was anything else I possibly could have tried, I would have tacked it on there, because in my mind, the surgery was the last ditch effort to fix this. And, thank goodness there were good surgeons in my area that I was able to have discussions with. And I got comfortable with a surgeon who I felt the surgeon and his team and the physical therapist that they work with did a great job. But I endorse all these different types of alternative treatments, and I definitely would have done it again before deciding to move forward with the surgery. So hopefully that is helpful. And, think about different types of alternative treatments you could do before moving forward with the surgery, and maybe even after surgery. I feel like I got a lot of benefits for the rest of my body, even if my hip did not have a long-term benefit. So there you go. There's the alternative treatments I tried. And I hope these help. And I want you to tune in next time, okay? Because I got something important to share, in that I was very young when I had my first hip replacement surgery. I was in my 30s, and I was very scared about that whole process. But the more surgeons I talked to, the more people I talked to, the more physical therapists I talked to, it turns out that a hip replacement surgery is not only for people in their 70s and 80s or 60s. The age of people having hip replacement surgery has been creeping down for a long time. So there's a lot of people in their 50s having hip replacement surgery. There's a lot of people in their 40s having hip replacement surgery. And, even a few in their 30s, like me, and even younger. So, if you think that this is an old person's surgery, old is all relative, right? If you think surgery is only for old people, that's not the case. And I found that quite shocking, but I'll go into more detail about that in the next episode. But that's what the next episode is going to be about: having a hip replacement surgery at a young age. All right. So I hope you catch that next episode, and thanks so much for tuning into the Hip Replacement Podcast. Until next time, I wish you the best recovery possible. Take care.